Let me tell you a story. Let's begin our conversation today in the Age of Enlightenment. The Age of Enlightenment. You know, those who have chronicled human history on this planet, historians and academics and scholars and scribes, have classified human history into different periods. We know that. Different ages, if you will. And so we have what is called the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, the Stone Age and the Dark Age and the Middle Ages. We have what is characterized, that's a key word, as prehistory and ancient history, post-classical history, modern history, and contemporary history. So I want us to focus now in on the early modern period of human history. And this is roughly, loosely considered to be the years between 15 and 1800, those 300 or so years. And focusing even further, I want to pitch a tent and camp out for a bit in what is called the Age of Enlightenment, which is, I would say, roughly the 100 years between 17 and 1800. Some call this 100 or so years the Age of Reason, and it is widely regarded as the century of philosophy. And so, brothers and sisters, let us travel back to the world of ideas in 18th century Europe. Specifically in France, this period was characterized by the phrase dare to know. And many of the leading thinkers and philosophers and researchers and writers and my favorites, the Freemasons of that time, often circulated their ideas and their thoughts through meetings at sort of scientific academies and at Masonic lodges and what they called literary salons and coffee houses, and through, of course, printed books and pamphlets. And what is key and significant about this emerging world of ideas, these developing thoughts and philosophies, is that they often undermined the authority of the ruling monarchy at that time. And in many cases, many times, this world of ideas was often at odds with and totally contrary to the established teachings of the Catholic Church. So many of those leading thinkers and philosophers that I was telling you about, and the researchers and the writers and the Freemasons at that time, the ones that were circulating those ideas in those meetings at the scientific academies and at the Masonic lodges and the literary salons and coffee houses, a lot of them had backgrounds in science and mathematics and physics and astronomy and biology and chemistry. So among them, there emerged this hunger, this thirst for recovering some of the lost knowledge of the ancients. And thus we got some of the new discoveries of that era by Copernicus and Galileo and Isaac Newton. And it was also around this time that some of those researchers began to advance scientific ideas and theories under headings, these were new headings at that time, of natural philosophy and natural history, looking more closely at the origins of man's chemical and biological and geological and anatomical nature. So these men began to examine the nature of mankind. And that now brings us, brothers and sisters, to Sweden and to one of its native-born sons, botanist, physician, and zoologist, Mr. Carl Linnaeus. First, he formalized the modern system of naming organisms using both their genus and species name. And that system we know today as binomial nomenclature. Binomial, bi meaning two, and nomial meaning name. So two names to characterize and classify plants and animals. So what does that look like? That's how we got Homo sapiens, two names, one genus, one species. That's how we got Homo erectus, two names to categorize and classify. These are examples of binomial nomenclature. So that's one thing. The second thing Brother Carl Linnaeus is known for, in 1735, he published the book Systema Naturae, or The System of Nature. And in that book, Carl Linnaeus classified thousands of species species of animals and plants. And what he also did was he described human beings just as he described any other plant or animal. And he did this by examining several monkeys and noting the similarities between the monkeys and man. And Carl Linnaeus pointed out that both species basically have the same anatomy, except for speech. He found no other differences between monkeys and man. So in his book, Systema Naturae, he placed man and monkeys under the same category. And he called this category anthropomorpha, meaning man-like. And eventually, in later editions of Systema Naturae, we, mankind, were classified as primates instead of anthropomorpha, and humans were given the full binomial of Homo sapiens. So that's how we got there. Now here's where it gets really interesting, brothers and sisters. In the first edition of Systema Naturae, and that would be the 1735 publishing of the book, Carl Linnaeus subdivided the human species into 4 varieties based on continent and skin color. Now this is 1735. Carl Linnaeus, of Swedish birth, a European man, subdivided the human species into 4 varieties. Number 1, Europaeus albus, also known as white European. Number 2, Americanus rubescens, also known as the red American. Americanus rubescens, the red American. Number 3, Asiaticus fuscus, also known as the brown Asian, which was subsequently changed in the 10th edition of the book, which was published in 1758. Asiaticus fuscus was changed to Asiaticus luridus, also known as the yellow Asian. So that's how we got there. And number 4, Africanus niger, also known as the black African. Africanus niger. Now we know today that Niger is a country in West Africa. Some people say Niger. And the history of that country dates way back into what is known as prehistory. So the first publication of Systema Naturae by Carl Linnaeus was in 1735, as I've said, and in the 10th edition of the book, which again was published in 1758, Carl Linnaeus went even further by detailing stereotypical characteristics for each of those 4 varieties of the species of man. All of those characteristics based on the concept of the 4 temperaments from classical Greco-Roman antiquity. Loosely, they are sanguine, which means enthusiastic, active, and social. Number 2 of the 4 temperaments, choleric, which means short-tempered, fast, or irritable. Number 3, melancholic, which means analytical, wise, and quiet. And the 4th of the 4 temperaments, phlegmatic, which means relaxed and peaceful. And so here's how he added those 4 varieties of the species of man. This is the descriptions that he added next to those 4 categorizations that he had done earlier in a previous edition of the book. Next to the Americanus, he wrote red, choleric, righteous, black, straight, thick hair, stubborn, zealous, free, painting himself with red lines, and regulated by customs. That's what he wrote next to Americanus. Next to Europeanus, he wrote white, sanguine, with abundant long hair, blue eyes, gentle, acute, inventive, covered with close vestments, and regulated by customs. And next to the Asiaticus, he wrote yellow, melancholic, stiff, black hair, dark eyes, severe, haughty, greedy, covered with loose clothing, and regulated by opinions. And next to the Africanus, he wrote black, phlegmatic, relaxed, black frizzled hair, silky skin, flat nose, tumid lips, that means swollen, females without shame, mammary glands give milk abundantly, crafty, sly, careless, anoints himself with grease, and regulated by will. Now these are the characteristics of the black man and black woman as listed in the year 1758 by Carl Linnaeus in his book Systema Naturae. And this, brothers and sisters, is one of the deep roots of race and racism as we know it today.